an extra set, the 5 little volumes from India. I got them all from Adi. And I said, I'll send you. Well, I never sent them. And then I delayed and delayed. And so I finally said, I got to make up for the delay. So I went to Colonial Williamsburg, and I had this beautiful, all bound in beautiful green leather. Really? And I sent them over to him. Really? Well, I went over in England. He was not in his place there. I stayed with some Baba people. I took a 10-day course in English legal history at Cambridge, and sponsored by one of our law schools. So anyhow, I used to jog around the place right across the Thames from where his place is. Mm-hmm. Yes. And then I got a tour of the place, and in this big room where they had their meeting, in one of the alcoves, they had this pedestal, and on it was the book, and on the bottom it says, donated by Judge Henry D. Kashouty of Hampton, Virginia. So.
That's great. Okay, Henry, could you tell the story of how God Speaks was actually the first Bob book that you read?
Yes. For about a year prior to that event of having received God Speaks, I had become very, very interested in the existence of genuine spirituality that included everybody. And the source of that happened, the beginnings of it started with my need to find something that made it very clear to me that there was meaning in life. Meaning of a kind that would be more than justify putting up with all of the things that to most of us are not very pleasant in life, and the difficulties. There had to be some meaning. So that was a preoccupation with me, and what I came up with finally was the evidence to me of great meaning in life was a truly fine human being. A human being that had the noble qualities later that I found Baba so explicitly talks about. Compassionate, intelligent, good humor, unselfish, courage. And in trying to determine, and those things impressed me so much, and my need was so great, I wanted to know how I compared or how far I had to go. And it would cause me to examine every thought that I had. And in that process, over a period of time, I recognized that almost my total preoccupation was my own comfort, my own pleasure. And so at that time, it made sense to me to not cater so much to the things that I really enjoyed. If I enjoyed a certain food, I wouldn't eat it. If I wanted to avoid a certain kind of inconvenience, I would deliberately confront it. And as a result of doing that, because of this need, because I saw this is what a person that I would admire would do, I began to have inner experiences that made me know I was going in the right direction. I was really improving over what I didn't like about myself. So I was just feeling it was nothing I read. So I kept going like that, and those feelings that I had made me know that I should just keep going in that direction. So it never occurred to me, although I'd visited different kinds of churches, it never occurred to me that there was anything to join. I didn't need anything. I would keep trying to do, to the best of my ability, what I was doing because I was experiencing results. And of course, it was much, much, much later, after MeherBaba, that I began to understand on a far deeper level what it was that made me look for meaning was the God in me, the soul in me, which is in everybody. And what made me recognize and admire something that was truly noble, the nobility of a life supremely loved that Baba is, those qualities individuals have to an extent. Then I realized that recognition, that longing, was the God in me. But I didn't think of it like that then. It was enough to find meaning, a goal such as noble human conduct. And I certainly didn't wear it on my sleeve. I was trying to overcome things So I was not comparing myself with anybody. I was just trying to improve over myself, over what I was. All right. Well, as a result of that process, I ended up going to a week or so on the top of a mountain, Afton Mountain in western part of Virginia. And the reason I went there was because the sister of a fraternity brother of mine that my cousin had met at a cocktail party was so impressed, my cousin was so impressed, and with this woman, although she really couldn't tell me what it was this woman had said, she said it was something philosophical. But because my cousin was a person who was not easily impressed, that was always in the back of my mind. I subsequently met her, not coincidentally, but we learned that these things are not coincidental. But I met her in Richmond because she was walking down the street with her brother, who happened to be in law school with me, a fraternity brother. And so then I met her. And then the same afternoon after we had coffee, I saw her again, this time alone. Now I could recognize her. Well, I asked her, then I could broach the question. I told her why I was interested in what it was that had impressed my cousin. And then she told me about Dr. Walter Russell. And she said, I may have some material still at home. But then she revealed to me, I would not have seen her after that day because she was going to take some advanced course in architecture at the Sorbonne in Paris. So I wouldn't see her after that. She called me that night and said she had given everything away, but she gave me the address, and I wrote away. I ended up going to this place where Dr. Walter Russell had people come and stay. And the result, I was impressed with him. First of all, he had never gone to school, but he came to sculptors of the Roosevelt family. His painting of the Might of Ages, King Albert of Belgium goes and presents the award to him. He said he never sought anything, and he said everything that he was able to do. Oh, he showed where the atomic table was incomplete, the Mendeleev table, and he did this work at Columbia University. He said everything that he was able to do was because God was his teacher. But he said, in other words, everyone he was saying has this. So that was a very unusual experience for me because I didn't go around with groups looking for this, that, or the other thing in terms of something esoteric or beyond the rational mind.
Just jump in.
Yes.
What was the first Baba book you read?
All right. As a result of the experiences I just talked about, Elizabeth Sakalis, who lived in New York State, came down. I simply told her all of the things that I felt were very important, very real, and very uplifting that I had discovered. She went back to New York, and she said she was walking on clouds for several weeks. And as a thank you, she sent me a book. I received it at my office. The title to the book was God Speaks. She had found it in a little bookstore. I think it may have been Samuel Weiser, but I'm not certain. And it had just been published. This was in 1955. So I opened the book, and I saw Baba's picture. I read probably no more than what was printed on the paper cover on the inside, and looked on the back where Baba's picture was there also. And I picked up the telephone and called her, and told her I received the book, thanked her. I said, Liz, he is the one. Find out how we can meet him. And then we waited for a period that seemed to be a very long period of time, probably several weeks or maybe 2 weeks. And finally I called her again from my home, and she said she had been to the publishers, Dodd Mead, and they said Meher Baba had been in the United States 1952, but they did not expect him to come back. So then I wrote a special delivery airmail letter to Meher Baba in India, and I said, Dear Meher Baba, I have your book, God Speaks. It has great meaning for me. I want to meet you, and I don't think that's impossible. And that was the conviction that I felt. Although meeting him in India, in any other context, would have been really far-fetched for me at that time, just starting out. So, and I received an airmail reply from Baba, giving me all the details about his upcoming visit in 1956 to the United States and what I was to do. A second letter came And in the second letter, he said, your connection with me is of long duration. You're one of the fortunate ones meant to recognize me. And, so that was the beginning of a correspondence. I would write to Baba from that time on. And
what about this conviction that you felt that Baba was the one? What in the book, for example, really?
It was not the book.
Was it the right?
So it had to be, no, it was just looking at his picture, reading what was said about him, to the extent there was something said about him on the paper cover, and I don't recall what that was, but the conviction was there about that he was, of course I did not know, having not read the book, the mechanics of the spiritual path and the hierarchy. I just knew that he was the authority. But bear in mind, I had the background of having read everything that I had ordered from the Vedanta Society of Southern California, about whom I heard from the only two books, there were two books that Dr. Walter Russell recommended. One was the Bhagavad Gita. The introduction was by Aldous Huxley. I read it. It seemed to be talking about things, it seemed to be talking about values that I had already discovered as being the most meaningful things to move towards. So I wrote to that address in Southern California, and I ended up getting the Upanishads, the complete works of Vivekananda, the Gospel of Ramakrishna, self-knowledge, those things. And I used to lock my office door so no clients would come. I didn't have a secretary at that time. And I read and read and read. And then I wrote to the person who was the scholar in the United States, head of the Ramakrishna Center in New York City, Swami Nikalananda, who taught at Columbia, and I think he occasionally lectured at the Ivy League schools. And so I wrote to him directly. I said, I said, I am now convinced of the reality that exists. I must meet someone who experiences that reality. He wrote me back and he said he was going to Paris. He would be back such and such a date in September. He said, you must come to see me. He said something to the effect that it would be an incredible experience to meet someone like Ramakrishna, but it is not necessary for your spiritual growth. One such as Ramakrishna comes along perhaps once in 500 years. So after that, that was the prelude to going to the visit of my wife's friend from New York who was studying art up there. And she was walking on clouds. And she sent me God Speaks. And I wrote to Meher Baba when she gave me the information that Dadmi did not expect Baba, who had been in the United States in 1952, to come back. And that's how I arranged to meet Baba in New York at the Hotel Delmonico in 1956. My wife and I went up there.
Let me stop you a second. Now, so you've done a little investigating of Ramakrishna and Vedanta and Bhagavad Gita. Did you see any direct similarities between those teachings and what you read in God Speaks?
Well, the values that I had begun to experience in myself by trying to change my conduct and my thinking was my first real direction. And I really didn't think I needed a teacher then, because I was improving and those values were becoming realities for me, and I began to have very beautiful feelings. So I felt I would just continue to improve. And because of my cousin telling me about this girl who said something so remarkable to a person not easily impressed, I had that in my mind for a year, and when as a result of speaking to her, I was ambivalent about going up to this place on the top of a mountain. I didn't think and it seemed to be impractical. And I needed to start my business and start my work and all that. So when I went up there, he recommended the Bhagavad Gita. I mean, and by reading that, here was something that was more explicitly saying, I was not that familiar with the Bible. I grew up as a Christian, but here was something explicit from a man's own words, who I considered to experience what he is saying. And that was very impressive. Well, he was not here, but that was a wonderful thing. To find some corroboration to that which I had discovered within myself, to find this kind of corroboration of someone really advanced was another upliftment. And right after that, I had very much planned to see this man. And then I got God Speaks, this man, Meher Baba, and I knew he was the authority, and that's all I knew, because I used that word before I comprehended the book. And so from that point on, after meeting Baba and seeing Baba, I was convinced, before seeing him, that he was who he says he was, God in human form. I was convinced of that. So the effort that I made after being convinced of that is, how do I take advantage of this incredible fact of existence? Even when I went and saw him in New York, he looked every bit the part, but I knew I was blind, because it was God talking. He appeared only in this sense totally masterful. The way he moved his head, his eyes flashing. When I embraced him, which I had never done to a man, not for any reason, I never had any reason to. And at that time, your greetings of men, they were not like afterwards with Baba people. I embraced him and I whispered in his ear, "I adore you." I would never say things like that. And I meant it. I truly meant it. But I was very, very, very unable to come up with anything that should be said to God in human form. See, I was stripping away everything about, I was trying to strip away everything from my thoughts and to say what should be said to this incredible fact, God in human form. The conviction was telling me, but I couldn't meet it. And so I don't even recall what went on. Then I was ushered out into the corridor from this room where Baba was. And there were groups speaking in that room, talking about various things. So I was very dissatisfied with not having come up with what was appropriate for this incredible opportunity, coming face to face with the God-man. So I just stood by the door, waiting for that door to open when people would be let out. Because each person would be called in so that they made sure everyone saw Baba. So I would just try to glimpse him, just to see in my mind, God is turning his head. It's an incredible fact. I was trying to see how he did that, how he held up his hand, how he gestured, every movement of his body, because it was God. I was convinced it was God. I knew that I must see. So finally, after several people were emitted from Baba's room, the door opened wide. Erich came out, who was with him. He said, "Baba says, what do you want?" And I said, "I must see him again." So Baba called me in. I don't know how long I stayed in there. I still could not come up with what I knew I needed to say. So the only thing I could come up with, I said, "Baba, I must experience the truth," which was to me very inadequate to say that. And Baba, his response was as though this was the only thing. Of course it is the only thing, but that's not how I saw it. And he went like this. He says, "That is the only thing worth experiencing. You will experience it, and I will help you." So whatever else happened, again out. This time my wife came. She had gone off shopping to get a dress for her brother's engagement party. And she came up and she was very put out. She's a very formidable woman. She was very put out without saying a word that I had gone in to see him before she got back. And I was really astounded in my mind, without saying anything, that one would see, she already knew what I felt about Meher Baba, that she would expect me to wait when my name was called to see God in human form. until she came back. So in that the intensity of the emotion I was feeling, reacting to what I perceived she was feeling without words being said at all, we were called both in. And Baba looked at us and he put his hand on his head. So he knew actually what was going on. He went like this. She sat down in front of him and he pulled off her earring. It wasn't a pierced ear. He pulled off her earring. And he knows everything. He knew the earring wasn't pierced. The ear. And he put it in her palm and he rolled her fingers up. And he fed her grapes. And I don't even remember what happened. My preoccupation was always to look at him, because I knew I had to see more than a human being, because of the conviction. I had conviction from the very beginning. Later, Tom Baba commented on my 100% conviction. But the point was, I didn't understand it that way. It took years of being with Baba and trying to fathom him and what I should be doing, and struggling with my own focus on self, which is an impossible thing. But you have no alternative with conviction. You see, that's the way it was. But it's the greatest hope. The greatest hope that keeps your nose above water. Fortunately, I had a big one. That was the greatest hope. So it lifted me when all the difficulties in my job. I'm not really crazy about law. I didn't like suing people. Didn't like so much being in the final position I was in.
What about
He made it possible for me, because of my conviction about him. I could do anything. I could put up with anything. But putting up with anything is not enough. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, karma. When you started being with Baba and learning about the nature of the universe, I'm assuming that a lot of the mysteries of life were kind of becoming revealed to you. How about karma? How did you feel about that when you knew that was, a part of the way life works?
I don't think that my concern, even before I found out something from him that he said to my wife and me, and he said to all of the people in the barn in '58, your karmic past is wiped out. I don't think that was a big concern because of him and the conviction. I mean, the concerns, I suppose, if I were to read about the necessity of answering for whatever it is you sow in this lifetime and all of that kind of thing, there would be some queries in your mind about it, maybe some concern about it, but the compelling thing was Meher Baba. He was God in human form, and he was there, and I knew about him. So my work was with him. I had to do my work to focus on him. And then after '62 in India, one of the things, and I did receive some beautiful statements from him and a few cables at moments when you're really down, depressed or whatever. So he would keep holding you up. In '62, one of the most important things that he said when we were there attending the East-West gathering, that was a very meaningful thing, became more meaningful out of necessity, was, you all have been children in my love. You must go home and find me where I really exist. I exist in the heart of my lovers. Well, on a certain level, those are words, because he was in the body, and you're expecting other things to happen, more letters, more cables, more meetings with him, but that's not doing the work. So when events made it impossible to see him, '65, he called that Sahavas in India off. I had managed to arrange to have all my family go, my children and my wife. And then I was working with someone on that flight thing, and then he calls it off. Well, in the beginning you say, where do I get the money? You get money. How do I do with my practice? That you solve that. And then you begin to anticipate going. My conviction, he's God in human form, I'm going to be with him. And so then your anticipation reaches higher and higher. And then he calls it off. It's crushing then. And then I remembered his words in 62. You have been children in my love. You must go home. And I said, I made sort of a mental affirmation. I will not allow even Baba himself to deprive me of his presence. You see, I knew that doesn't mean I was equal to it, because being equal to it means putting him before self. But I knew, because he was God and I had conviction, that those words had to become a reality. The hardest kind of work imaginable. You have to rise above self. How are you going to do it? Rise above self when every thought is self. But he was God. It was like him saying, what you must do, make yourself want to do. That makes it an incredible fact. You can actually, a human being, be set with a mountain of problems and difficulties and concerns and worries and self, can actually do what he said. That's the important thing. Now, in 58, when we were all in the barn, everybody was seated around, and Baba held up God Speaks. He says, who understands it? And then he answered his own question. He said, I don't understand it myself. The comments that he made became a reality, became a means to this unbelievable end. Anything that makes you think about me is a good thing. The discourses don't give you the opening of the heart, the spiritual awareness. God Speaks doesn't give it to you. Yes, it answers the intellect. Yes, the discourses lay it out for you, answers the intellect. The mechanics of the spiritual evolution of the soul, absent consciousness, evolving consciousness, and then focused in, and then taking consciousness off of what it imagines alone exists, the creation because I am the body. All that was laid out, but that was not the means by which the motivation becomes like a small candle bursting into a larger and larger and larger flame. He said, anything, I interpreted that, anything that makes you think about me is a good thing. I am in you. I am the self in you that you can never find. So I said, what I have to do is think about him. Just remember him, not try to figure about, because I'm already there. I'm convinced about him. See? I'm convinced about him. And so that was my path. No one would ever be satisfied with the progress they make. We know when we're self-indulgent. We know when we know when we are exercising our self-will, not Baba's will, not trying to carry out his will. When Baba says 99% of suffering is unnecessary, that was a magnificently uplifting statement. Very impossible, or almost impossible, to do what is necessary to focus on Baba from moment to moment. And focusing up on Baba has consequences. If you're remembering Baba, you're going to try to be a little bit better than you are. If you're going to have a negative thought, you're going to try to move over to remember Baba, and by that means deal with that negative thought. Keep it from keeping you enslaved. For every negative thought that comes on the stage of your explicit mind, there are 1,000 waiting off stage to come on. So Baba is, as the Latin phrase, the sine qua non of the awakening of the heart. His existence, you know that he is real. Then all of your machinations in the mind should be focused upon how to put self down, that difficult job. And then you find out by making that effort, you're actually feeling some relief inside, even in the midst of problems. It's gradual, yes, just like the sun, just like dawn coming up, so gradual, but inevitable. That's what this was. And I never felt I needed to go back to India. I didn't have to go here or there. If I go down to the center, yes, memory is a wonderful place, because it was within me. And it was, and 69, of course, we went for the last Darshan. Well, shouldn't that be telling that at leave something for my Sunday talk?
More story regarding that time in the barn where God Speaks came up? I'll have to say something else about it there. Because he said
his memory.
Yeah, because he told you to. He was telling people to read it twice, except for you. Can you maybe recount that a little bit?
I didn't hear that from him. I heard it from different individuals. Baba never told me to read anything. But I heard from other people. When I read the book, it was a difficult book for me. The frames of reference were not familiar with the 10 states of God and all of that sort of thing. But as I matured more with Baba, then I went back to God Speaks. I skipped that first portion, and I loved reading it because now I wanted to know what the spiritual plane experience. I wanted to have something graspable about it because now I knew it was real. All of these things that he's explaining. So my intensity grew.